Okay, so good evening. My name is Angela Waller. I am the Director of External Affairs for the Office of the Cook County Board President, the Honorable Tony Preckwinkle, and we are excited and honored to have you here tonight to have a very robust discussion on equity. We are joined by three of our esteemed commissioners on the Cook County Board, and I would like to invite Commissioner Maggie Trevor up to give welcome remarks to you.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Maggie Trevor. I am the 9th District Cook County Commissioner. I'm relatively newly elected. I was elected in December. I'm one of three today. We are all three represent different parts of the northwest suburbs, and actually our districts kind of converge around this area. This is also a sort of a homecoming for me. I have a long and deep connection to Harper College. My mother worked here as director of women's programs for 17 years when I was growing up. So these issues are really important to me and in this district, and I think that this is an important conversation to have in the northwest suburbs, because I think that sometimes we don't really understand how this whole project relates to us up here. So I'm very happy to be here tonight to hear what our panelists have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we will have Commissioner Kevin Morrison.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kevin Morrison. I represent the 15th District on the County Board, and it's an honor to be with you all this evening. When I was elected in 2018, I actually became the first openly LGBT person on the Cook County Board of Commissioners, so equity is definitely something that is a top priority for me personally. I am glad to say I'm no longer alone on the board. We now have 3 openly LGBT members with the election of Maggie Trevor and Anthony Quezada. One of the first moves I actually made once being elected was creating a brand new commission on addressing equity, bias, and cultural competency. That commission led to numerous town halls and meetings with organizations in the space countywide. It led to the hiring of our first county equity director and culminated to actions like our current equity fund, which you're going to hear more about today. So it is incredibly exciting to see that Cook County is focused on ensuring that every action we take has and is through an equity lens. That is what our target and our aim is, and though there's a lot of work to be done, I'm so happy to be part of that progress. So I thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to join us here at Harper, and I will pass it along to Commissioner Scott Britton. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And welcome to the beautiful 14th District of Cook County, where we are right now. You know, when I redrew the map, when we redrew the map, I said, Harper stays with me. I know, Kevin probably was looking at it. I'm sure Maggie would, but we didn't know she was going to be on the board then. So, but I look out and see so many people who I have gotten to know and who we partner with on so many different things, and so much wonderful work that gets done. And it includes our elected officials, and I'm not going to go through everyone, but I do really want to say a specific shout out to the Mayor of Rolling Meadows, Laura Sonoaka. So thank you, Mayor, for being here. Nothing gets done without the cooperation of all of us together, and particularly our not-for-profits, our social service agencies, our religious institutions. All of this is incredibly important to us. Now, COVID was obviously a huge challenge. It was a challenge for the county as well, but I also do believe that there are opportunities created even in the worst of circumstances. And one of those opportunities has now been presented to us in that we received over $1 billion from the federal government, which they're not going to do again anytime soon, I'm sure, which we've then committed a substantial amount of resources to creating a more fair, more just, and more equitable Cook County. This is the president's vision. It has been her vision since she has been in office. It is our vision. It is our job to support her and to make sure the Cook County Board becomes a part of this solution, along with all of you. And I think that it is incredibly important that we have a robust dialogue about all the things that we are doing and all the things that we could be doing to make things better for our residents. And so thank you very much for being here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we hear a lot of buzzwords, equity, equality, and we really hear things that, kind of go over our heads. So we're going to watch this video that's going to help us to level set and prepare us for this conversation.
Equity. It's different from equality. Equality, of course, is treating everyone the same, as if we all come from the same place and need the same things. Equity is different. It reminds us that there is no one size that fits all, no one solution for every problem. People who have been overlooked for a long time need more attention. We all know there's a problem. But the question is, what can we do about it? In Cook County, we're taking bold, sweeping action to address endless cycles of racist policies and historic inequities. We created the Cook County Equity Fund because we believe government has the responsibility to make sure we all, regardless of race, gender, or sexual orientation, share equally in our civil and human rights. The right to live safely, the right to good health, the right to a clean environment, the right to economic vitality, the right to leaders we can trust. The Cook County Equity Fund is undoing decades of disinvestment that made life difficult for generations of people pushed to the margins of our society. Our commitment to you is total. But reversing systems of injustice centuries in the making is a tremendous undertaking. Succeeding requires partnerships with organizations both public and private. This historic fund is unique in the world of government.
There are many reasons we're the first to create something like the Equity Fund. It's very hard work, but it must be done, and the time to do it is now. History will remember us not for our caution, but for our courage to act when it mattered most.
So with the Equity Fund, there were 25 recommendations that came out of the Equity Fund task force that was actually doing the work. And if you can see in the back of the room, all 25 recommendations are on those boards. So you can take a glance at those when you get a chance to. But right now, we're going to bring up one of the architects of the Equity Fund, and that is the Chief of Staff of the Cook County Board President, and that is Lynetta Haynes-Turner. And we're going to bring up the entire panel so that you all can hear them as well. So Lynetta is going to provide us with an overview of the Equity Fund, and then she's going to be joined by Kyla Williams-Tate, who will talk to us about digital equity. We also have Superintendent Jennifer Killen of the Department of Transportation and Highways for Cook County. And this it's going to be moderated by, of course, Commissioner Britton.
I think the first thing we want to do is discuss a little bit about what each of our esteemed panelists are doing, especially as it relates to the Equity Fund and all the work that we have done. And Lynetta, I think you can lead us off.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Lynetta Haynes-Turner, Chief of Staff for Offices under the President, and I guess the architect of the Equity Fund. I will say, however, that the work could not happen without the colleagues that are not here, who are working day in and day out to actually implement those 25 recommendations in addition to their day-to-day. So the Equity Fund was established back in November of 2020. If you all recall, that summer, there was the death of George Floyd, there was civil unrest. We were still very much in the beginning of the pandemic. And while everyone was saying the buzzwords around wanting to be more equitable and, racial equity and all of that, what we decided to do is let's put the money where our mouths are, right? The county, and I know Commissioner Morrison had said earlier, there had been since 2018 with our policy roadmap an intentional commitment around equity, excellence, and engagement. And so by the time 2020 came, we had already been doing a lot of internal work to better understand what it meant by racial equity and what the role of government was in undoing some of those historic disinvestments, racist policies, things of that nature, whether we were here or not. If it was a responsibility, we felt that it was government, right? We want to make sure that we are providing services and resources for all. That's equality. But we also want to acknowledge and understand that based on data, there are still many Black, Latino, and other marginalized groups, including immigrants, that don't have access to the services that the county provides, that don't have the ability to tap in because of language barriers or digital equity, which you're going to hear, the connectivity issue. And that certainly was elevated during COVID, where many of our residents was disconnected and isolated because they didn't have the internet and the hardware necessary, and transit equity. So tonight, you're going to hear about 3 different recommendations within the fund. But we invested $50 million and made the commitment to put additional dollars in and year out. And so we're negotiating what that looks like for FY24. But many of our staff members are the ones that are on the front line, really thinking about those large system barriers. We spent a lot of time thinking internally, learning definitions, making sure that we are putting training into place because everybody is at a different place in their journey. But we also wanted to look public facing and really think about all of the systems that touch county. And so I'm happy that we have so many of you in the room because you're partners in the work. And we're going to get there and have a more equitable community and equitable outcomes only with all of us really working towards it and being intentional about it. So that's a little bit of what I'll say about the Equity Fund.
Thank you, Lynetta. And I think I'll turn it over then to Kyla, and we can just start with, when you hear the phrase digital equity, it doesn't immediately call to mind exactly what it is, your role is. Can you just explain that to the group?
Well, at the county, I'm responsible for helping to bring community together to ensure that they have access. So that's access to affordable and quality internet, access to digital skills training, access to information to keep them safe while they're participating online, and helping to navigate the infrastructure question. So we have fiber that is laying in our grounds, and some of that is active, some of that is not. And so figuring out ways that we can increase connectivity to the places and spaces that need it the most.
And if you were to try and look out 2-3 years down the road, what is the goal, at least short term and then long term, for both the use of the Equity Fund and then continuing support for digital equity going forward?
So I think that our immediate goal, and it's going to take some time, is to really build our digital equity ecosystem. So we have some digital equity champions in the South suburban area, in the West suburban area, in the North suburban area, working in libraries, working in schools, working in government. But we are not working all together. It's not coordinated. So you're making some incremental progress in your particular communities, but we're working in these silos and we're not maximizing or leveraging all of our collective impact and power. So what we are trying to do, and we'll we'll be able to show that a little bit more, because our inaugural Digital Equity Action Plan is coming out on Monday, which is the first day of Digital Inclusion Week, which is October 2nd through the 6th. In the plan, we talk about how we're trying to build that digital equity ecosystem. People say, well, what's the first thing you're going to do? And I say, well, I think we want to love on our libraries, right? We have our libraries all over the county, and they operate independently based on their municipality. But think about what power we could have in our county if all of our libraries were connected and working on some similar things and leveraging resources, and then connecting to school libraries and law libraries and other libraries in the community, and utilizing their place-making spaces as digital hubs in our communities. We already know, I'm a library kid. I spent a lot of time in libraries because it was a safe space for me to be, for my family to be at the end of the school day. And so we know that those are safe spaces in communities, so it's a wonderful place for us to be able to think about digital equity in that way.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm glad you brought that up. I was just meeting yesterday with some library directors, some of whom had received the bomb threats that had been issued recently, and then they were also talking about book bans and how they're responding and how they're needing counseling for some of their librarians. And it occurs to me that we're now at a place in our country, this is not a positive, where the front line in defending the exchange of ideas are the soft-spoken, very pleasant librarians who work every day to make sure that we can preserve the ability for people to access the things they want to see. And those who don't have internet access use our libraries constantly for being able to apply for jobs or do whatever they have to do when they need internet, which is not spotty. That's exactly what I think the digital divide has reminded us of, and how libraries are a huge part of the solution. I'm going to switch now to Sis Killen, who's the superintendent of Department of Transportation and Highways. And Sis has to talk to me a lot because I have a lot of roads in the 14th District, many of them needing a little bit of work, but we're getting there, But one thing I would think as you sit here, you might not think, well, transportation and highways, how is that related to equity and the things that we're doing within the county to try to make things more beneficial to historically disadvantaged groups. So Sis, can you just kind of describe how you fit into all that?
I would be grateful to. Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'm, again, Sis Killen, the superintendent. And we know transportation, just like libraries, they are the fabric of our communities. They are catalysts for community growth. They are catalysts for economic development. But as we think about the transportation system, we need to have one that is connected and integrated. There are over 205 transportation agencies that work in Cook County. Cook County is responsible for only 5% of the transportation network, yet we're trying to build connections. We're trying to move people to places and spaces, thinking about their commutes to work, their trips to the doctor's office, errands and recreation. The charge of our department under President Preckwinkle is holistic and equitable transportation solutions. Transportation is not just getting in your car and going from point A to point B. You are a pedestrian, likely, for part of your journey. You may be a bicyclist for part of your journey. You may also be using one of those forms of transportation and then connecting to transit. So we need to move away from this thought about transportation being car-centric and think of it more holistically, more broadly, more inclusively. And as the department was engaging in the Equity Fund, one of the areas that we focused on was transit equity. We have a very robust transit system in Northeast Illinois, but it only helps you if you have access to it. We're thinking about physical accessibility, we're thinking about financial accessibility, and we want to be thoughtful about the commutes that our residents have. If you need to connect from, taking a bus to a train, taking a train, getting off and taking another bus, and then maybe having to walk or bike the rest of your journey, that might put career opportunities out of your reach. It might put career opportunities out of your reach if you're having to spend 2 hours commuting each way. Transit is a key opportunity, but again, it's only if you can access it. So that is one of the reasons why Transportation and Highways really took a closer look. Where do we have deserts where there is no transit available? How can residents get to jobs? We know that in every community, bringing businesses in, helping them grow, and having them stay and employ your residents and have a robust workforce is important. And we think that transit is one of those catalytic opportunities to do that. It can be an incentive. Where might big companies locate so that people who don't have a car or want a car, but they know that that is the talent they need to have in their firms, can happen. So as part of our work, we actually launched some transit pilots where we were testing out some fare policy as part of this work and saying, what happens if you decrease fares? What happens if you increase service? So we're really looking at those opportunities through a 3-year pilot that we launched really as an outcome of the Equity Fund and one of the recommendations of the task force. We're about 2.5 years into it, and it was a pilot that we did with Metra, so the commuter rail service, and Pace Suburban Bus, where we increased service on Pace's only 24-hour bus route. It was on the South Suburban Cook County. We increased the frequency that bus came at. So we wanted to improve people's quality of lives, not having them stand in the elements while they're waiting for their bus. We partnered with Metra so that we could reduce fares on 2 lines, and these were in South Suburban Cook County where we saw the highest prevalence of transit dependency, and we saw the largest clusters. Transit deserts, meaning it's there, but you can't access it. What good is it if you can't get to it? So we wanted to see what impact fare policy had on ridership, and it's not just if you make it cheap enough, people will use it. It's just like going to the store. You can discount a product as much as you want, but if you don't need it, you're not going to buy it. We thought that there was something here with advancing transit equity, and we've seen success in the pilot. And again, really recognizing how transportation and transit and other transportation alternatives are truly critical to communities. That is an area where the department has shifted its thinking and its framework from a purely, more just a decade ago, roads and bridges. That was all Cook County government focused on, was roads and bridges, and if only they were the red lines because they were under county jurisdiction. Transportation is more than communities, so we shifted our focus to make sure we could make it more inclusive.
Thank you, Sis. Lynetta, I'm going to go to you next, and this is more related to the more broad concepts like the safe and thriving communities and the fact that we're trying to expand all of the different ways in which we try to address systemic racism, which is so much a part of the equity question that we deal with. And as you know, I've been, after the murder of George Floyd, I did work strongly on the 10 shared principles, trying to improve policing models throughout the suburbs. The city of Rolling Meadows is going to be signing on shortly to that. Thank you, Mayor. But I'm wondering, what about the policies that we're doing is going to address the previously and current adversarial relationship between particularly communities of color and our police departments, and that includes the 130 police departments that I have in the suburban Cook County region.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Let me back up a little bit and just also say, give a little bit more context to the work. So we created the fund in November of 2020, and we seeded it with, over the next 2 fiscal years, with that first $50 million. And the Equity Fund Task Force, which I want to thank again, Commissioner Britton and Commissioner Morrison, and I see Julie there, who was an extension of the President's office during the work. We had 85 members of the Equity Fund Task Force, which was the advisory body that we set up to help us do the work. We didn't want to just do the work internally, right? Because this is about the partnership and the collaboration, and we know that we can't change systems by ourselves. We have to have committed folks that are really subject matter experts within their own purview that sees how you connect the dots and how do you eliminate the disparities that we have. The task force worked for almost 2 years, twice a month, all on Zoom, 85 people. Can you understand the power of having all of those folks In the middle of the pandemic and all of the craziness that all of us were going through, they were committed enough to be partners with the county, thought partners, subject matter experts, accountability partners, and really driving that. And so in addition to the safe and thriving, just wanted to kind of make sure, understanding the framework, that those 25 recommendations are over each of our policy pillars. And so yes, it's digital equity, transportation equity, of course I'll talk about community safety, but it's also about health equity, right? And making sure that our residents are, those particularly who need more, are really connected to a network of providers so that wherever they are in their journey, when they go to their primary care doctor and or other providers, that they're all connected and they understand what you need, and then they're better able to identify the gaps. When you think about mental health crisis and wanting to form a behavioral health unit, which is one of the equity recommendations and significant funding that our Cook County Health and Hospitals is receiving. And then in transportation, the environment and sustainability. I know Commissioner Trevor and many of our other commissioners are very much interested and passionate about it. But with the recent flooding and all of that, climate change and having that resiliency and really working with those municipalities that may not have the resources to make sure that they have their preparedness plans and the training and to reducing, pollution and increasing clean water. Those are really kind of the large system recommendations that came out of the Equity Fund, and now we're putting the intentional dollars behind it to do that work, knowing that it's going to be incremental progress. So for the community safety in particular, our Justice Advisory Council, the executive director couldn't be here tonight, but when I started at the county 9 years ago, I was the executive director of the Justice Advisory Council, which is the President's Criminal Justice Office and subject matter expert. They really work centering community and centering really the community centered and community informed around how do we really improve the criminal legal system and make sure that it is equitable. Across the board, there are always about 5,000 or so individuals in our Cook County Jail. 74% of them are Black. Black men in particular under the age of 24, right? And then another 20% or so are Latino. And that disparity isn't just in the criminal justice system. If you think about the health inequities and those who don't have access to health care, that inequity, I don't know, how many of you have seen kind of the folded map project and then the work around looking at if you just went just the red line from north to south, the life expectancy shifts the further south that you go. And so when we're thinking about the community safety piece in the criminal legal system and really thinking about not having always a police response, we are really looking at those non-police response and really addressing the root causes that brought people to where they are. Not suggesting that you don't hold them accountable, but there is an equitable way to do that. There is rehabilitation, and if you're providing them with jobs, housing, and safe spaces, what we all want for ourselves and for our family members, then you start to change that dynamic. And so the work around the criminal justice system doesn't have to be adversarial. I think that there's a role for everyone. The Justice Advisory Council really looks at the policy, but and that's the legislation and the work in partnership with many of our state legislators. I don't know if you all have heard, but the Pretrial Fairness Act just passed and was this past session in Springfield, and it was just implemented after some delay on September 18th. But that starts to really address those underlying root causes, allowing the police to do what they're constitutionally required to do through a cultural lens and building that trust and legitimacy in those communities where they are, but also saying that it's an and. It's not just police, it's also providing those underlying resources and services in an equitable way, and making sure that we're doing that in partnership and not creating fear-mongering and really being thoughtful about how we move forward over time.
Thank you, Linda. Kyla, I'm going to go to you next. This actually confuses me a little bit, so maybe you can clear it up for me, because I keep hearing digital equity, digital inclusion, and digital divide. Can you just kind of give me an idea as to what all that stuff means, or is it all the same thing, or is it all different?
It's definitely different. So digital equity means full participation in society using all of the internet and technology tools that anyone can be utilizing in their life to make it better. So full access, full participation in the digital economy, a digital society. That's what digital equity is. Digital inclusion is like the activities of digital equity, ensuring that people have access to high-speed internet and quality internet, affordable internet, making sure that there is the opportunity to receive digital skills training, making sure that folks have access to devices so that they can do all the things that they need to do. That's digital inclusion. And digital divide is really the gap between full society participation, the lack of access to the inclusion, and if you don't have those, then you have a divide. So I tell a story all the time. When I was in 7th grade, my school's library got its first set of computers. So I'm dating myself, right? And it was a glorious day. We were like, whoa, computers, this is so cool. So that Saturday, we went to visit some family. I grew up in the Southland. We went to visit some family on the west side of Chicago. And I said, yeah, our library got some computers. Did your library get some computers? And my cousin said, what is a computer? So then, and he was in 12th grade. I was only in 7th grade. So 5 years later, when I graduated from high school, the kids that were at school still did not have computers. That's the digital divide. And so NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, has a wonderful way to explain digital inclusion, digital equity, and the digital divide. They say the digital divide is the issue, digital equity is the goal, and digital inclusion is the work.
That was a real well put way to do it. Thank you. Sis, I'm going to go to you next. And, so I have 24 communities in my district, which is a lot. And I deal with a lot of good people, a lot of people who, how did they end up here? How did they get elected? I don't know. But, I won't name names, but they all know who they are. You have 130 or so that you have to deal with. How do you get them all, how do you coordinate doing all of this with them? Because there's things that affect every part of the county, north, west, and south. And then how do they get bought into the part of this that has an equity lens as part of what they're trying to do in concert with us?
That's a great question, Commissioner. Thank you. So we have over 130 municipalities, and every time we take on a project, it's different. There are no cookie cutter solutions. There's no one size fits all methodology that can be applied. So as we're undertaking projects in different communities, it might be a simple resurfacing. We might be reconstructing a roadway. We might be partnering with one of the transit agencies to rebuild a station in that community and provide modern amenities. We need to step back and make sure that community members are at the table. How are we scoping out a project? Who do we need to talk to understand what the need is? And this is something that the department has been doing since I got there over a decade ago. We can't pat ourselves on the back and say, well, we satisfied the technical requirements. We did what we, air quotes now, we're supposed to do, and we accomplished the goal, if we didn't really address what the holistic needs were in a community. Did we need to bring other agencies to the table in order to accomplish the goal or the need? We recognize that when it comes to infrastructure, the needs are great and the dollars are few, and we want to make sure that we're really targeting our investment in the areas that the communities identify as being the top priority. And one of the ways that we've done that is through an annual grant program that every community gets to submit their application for. So communities are telling us what is their highest need, not we're telling them what the highest need is, simply based on data. Well, this is your condition index, therefore we must go there first. We need to make sure that we're recognizing communities. How can we ensure that our investments can catalyze economic development? Is there a business coming into your community where we may need to advance projects further? Do we need to rethink the scope so that we can actually help a community accomplish their goals for recreational areas and open space? And as part of that process, there is open engagement. It's several touch points throughout the project to identify what we need to do. Let's come back and calibrate and see, are we on the right track as we're doing alternatives analysis? Because again, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but it's making sure that community stakeholders give us their perspective. What do we not see? You know, there is a qualitative and quantitative side to every project's implementation, and that is where we ensure that we are being equitable, we are being holistic, and we're really understanding what value the county investment can bring, and quite honestly, that we're also understanding what is the detriment of maybe not delivering on a certain part of a project that truly needs to be there. So we come from what we were talking about earlier, this yes and approach. You know, maybe we do need to step back to the drawing board. Maybe we do need to go find some more funds so we can truly deliver the outcomes that we know communities need to have. And again, needs are great, dollars are few. Not every transportation, concern or issue is one that jurisdictionally belongs to Cook County. But we are vested in our communities. We are vested to have our local leaders as our partners, and be our guiding light when it comes to the execution of our policy initiatives.
That sounds great. And it, in a broader sense, one thing I have learned, having been in this job for a while now, is that it's the coordination piece that I think we have not done as well on all these aspects. And I think about the people who are sitting here and the fact that we all could be doing things in concert together. But I did not know that certain groups existed before I got into this job. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do together much more effectively as part of this, always with this equity lens that we're constantly trying to deal with. But there are ways in which we can coordinate, and I think that Commissioner Morrison has seen this over the last 4 years. I'm sure Commissioner Trevor is going to be doing this as well. And if it takes us and our offices to help coordinate this, that's what we're here for. And I think, my staff is here as well, along with the other commissioners. We're here to help you, making sure that your resources are shared when appropriate. And if you have a need, sometimes it's not a government that needs to step in. It's another social service agency or another group or another municipality. But we know everybody now, and so we can try and do that and coordinate in a way that makes sense. And so I think that's why it's so exciting for me to see all of you here, because you do so much wonderful work, and doing it together is so much more effective. Lynetta, one thing maybe I've said this too much, but we're not going to get another $1 billion anytime soon. And so I just want to make sure that when you look at particularly the equity sense of this, do you feel like we have gotten the kind of input, community input, that really makes you feel like, yes, we do know where the needs are, where the resources need to go, and at least we're pointing in the direction where we're going to make a significant difference on something that we're just not going to get another opportunity to do?
Yes, that's a good question. Thank you, Commissioner. So we can never speak to community as enough, in my opinion, and government traditionally has not done the greatest job of that. We had another opportunity to do that when the funding came down from the American Rescue Plan, and we had a very robust community engagement process that included all of the commissioners, so thank you all again. There were community town halls similar to this. We had a very large survey. Speaking about digital equity, we had a Wikipedia a survey as well, and some of us was like, what? It's a word cloud? It does what? And you just add to it, and how do you access it? And is that on the internet? In the cloud, right? And so there was a lot of community engagement at the local level across the county, from here all the way south, that really helped us determine how we were going to leverage those $1 billion. With very good fiscal stewardship over the last 12, 13 years, The president's office and offices under the president was in a unique position where we didn't have to use all of the funds to fund our operations. And we were in a privileged spot because we know many of our municipalities were struggling during the time of COVID, and some larger municipalities that received the direct funding chose to use that for their day-to-day operations and things of that nature. We made a commitment to put out 70% of our ARPA funds for those community recovery programs. And many of them were done through an equitable lens, thinking about who benefits, who doesn't, where are the gaps in services and resources, and quite frankly, when you are filling those gaps, then you are actually lifting up all of the other communities as well. So it's not an either or, it's an and. If you are able to increase our tax base, if you're able to make certain communities more economically viable, that benefits all of Cook County and all residents, right? So 70% of those programs, we have about 71, 72 programs, and a lot of those were reaffirmed by community. Their top areas in the survey that they said that they wanted to see was climate change, healthcare, community safety, economic development, specifically small business owners who were also struggling, including the libraries and other municipalities. And so we think that we had some really, really good dialogue, some really good feedback, and with our internal staff in partnership with our commissioners, I do think that we were able to really use that community voice. But it's ongoing. It's events like this. It's doing more, talking about our work, hearing ideas from you all, what's happening, what's not happening, where should we be really looking at other best practices, although I do think that Cook County and the state of Illinois is the best. And we hear that a lot when we're outside of Chicago limits. So those are ongoing, right? Community engagement and hearing the voices of our residents isn't just a one-time. It's consistent, it's authentic, and it's us coming to your spaces and not requiring you to come to us. So those are all things that we are improving on, but certainly with the process that we use for ARPA in determining where all of those programs and how we were going to spend our money. And I would say that the Equity Fund was very intentionally aligned with the ARPA because we had established the Equity Fund with our own county corporate dollars before we knew we were getting the $1 billion. And so we were able to, during the planning process, make sure that there was an alignment. So for instance, I mentioned earlier the behavioral health unit. We provided our Cook County Health and Hospital Systems with $74 million of ARPA funds over the course of 3 years to actually establish a behavioral health unit authority. And that really is because suburban Cook does not have that convening body, the subject matter expert, the public-facing coordination around behavioral health and mental health programs and services. And so closing that gap really does require having that anchor. And we're behind, right? And we're looking at San Diego for our model here. But that certainly was the alignment and the throughput from ARPA to the recommendation in the Equity Fund, because that is a significant part of where communities, particularly communities of struggle, communities of color struggle when it comes to behavioral health and mental health services. So that's just an example of the close tie and the coordination between the two.
That sounds great. And we have distributed some cards, so that if there's any questions, maybe somebody can bring those up, and I'd be happy to address a few of those. I'll give you one reason why I feel like there's hope in all of this. Not just because I feel like the President's office has really taken this concept and run with it and made it a truly realized goal of the county, in which all of the commissioners, almost all the commissioners, are on board. So, but I also I think about my time as a trustee in the village of Glenview when I was the only voice that ever brought up anything about affordable housing and Hugh Brady is here, and Hugh knows how this has been a struggle throughout the north suburbs, where we want to make sure that people who work in our communities can afford to live in our communities. What was once a very lonely voice is now, there are village managers coming to me, there are village presidents coming to me saying, we want to put a plan together, can you help us on some of this? It is a sea change in how things are looked at, particularly in the north and northwest suburbs, and I think it's a function of people finally realizing how incredibly important these issues are, and we need to be able to act on those, also to provide places for people to live so that they can prosper and grow and pay taxes and all the things that we want them to do as well. While we're getting the questions, I'll ask one last very quick one of Kyla. I know it's coming out Monday. Can you give us a quick preview as to the report and what generally that you've learned or that you think that our group would be interested in?
Absolutely. So during our community conversations, so this summer we had 12 community conversations, 10 in person, 2 virtually, 2 in Spanish. We talked to a lot of people. We got about over 3,000 surveys in from folks around gaps that they were experiencing or pain points or even suggestions of solutions of how we could help them address their digital equity gaps in their communities. The number one thing that came out of those conversations was quality and affordability. Folks, and it didn't matter where they were on the economic scale or where they lived specifically in the community, folks talked about that the internet is expensive and it's unreliable and that they wanted some support around navigating that space. The second issue was around security and safety. Close to 80% said that they do not participate on the internet or are involved in any type of digital service because they don't trust the internet. And they have good reason not to. There's a lot of nefarious things happen out there on the online situations, but we are endeavoring to create a network of digital safety and security for our communities through education, through community help desks, helping people to be able to understand how to better protect their personal information, how to better protect and service their own devices, and ensuring that that information is readily available where we are the trusted voice for our residents around digital safety and security.
I'm excited to read the whole thing, but it sounds like exactly what we've been looking at. So I don't have to necessarily try and figure out the handwriting. I think, Stephanie, did you have a question? I'm going to start with just bringing the mic over to Stephanie, and then I can see if I can read the rest of this.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Scora. Thank you, Commissioner Britton. My name is Stephanie Scora. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the co-founder and chief development officer of Brave Space Alliance, the Southside LGBTQ Center of Chicago. We serve all LGBTQ people and people in need in the city of Chicago with a focus on the south and west sides. Commissioner Britton, you spoke a lot about how we're not getting this money again, right? This is the ARPA funds are a one-time investment. And so I wanted to ask yourself as well as the panel, has there been consideration, especially in the health system, in making impact investments? One of the issues that we're facing right now as a county is influxes of migrants. We have migrants who are being bused here from other states and other cities. We also have folks who are coming to Cook County, fleeing other states as a result of bigoted laws that target the LGBTQ community. We're very lucky in Cook County to have the most robust human rights protections for LGBTQ people of any county in the country. And so one of the things that Brave Space and our organizations have been kicking around in our communities that serve both Black and LGBTQ people is impact investments around health. For example, things like cross-training and hiring more endocrinologists in the Cook County system that are trained in providing gender-affirming care and hormone therapy to address the influx of individuals who will need that care, and also making impact investments in addressing diabetes, which is one of the leading causes of death in our Black communities across the county. So I wanted to ask the panel, has there been a thought about making impact investments and cross-training like that to serve multiple communities, and how is that really working with these funds?
So certainly that is an area that our Cook County Health and Hospitals has been looking at. And as the safety net hospital, they serve any and everyone that comes to their doors, which I think is not just a moral responsibility, but of course, when you're thinking about the fiscal impact and how many who don't have insurance end up with debt, losing their homes, the whole 9 yards. And so we do actually have a medical debt relief program through the ARPA dollars that is already eliminating millions of dollars worth of debt of some of our residents across Cook County. So I would say yes. I don't have those details now, but certainly our Cook County Health and Hospital, as part of the Behavioral Health Authority, they are also building out those impact funds. And to your point, when we're talking, the equity fund specifically was really around racial equity and eliminating some of those disparities and inequities. But it's an and it's at the intersection of gender, it's at the intersection of health equity, it's at the intersection of race, it's at the intersection of income, right? So all of those inequities across the board, because you can't separate them out. So certainly that is a significant area that our health system is looking at and building out. They are still trying to make sure that they have all of the components. They're going to be bringing a lot of other partners to the table to help them with that work. And kudos to Brave Space. I think you guys do wonderful work.
And I'll say that I got to tour Brave Space recently and was incredibly impressed by everything you do. And I can tell you that there are times when, if I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I do think, yeah, we got to find a way to make sure that we can continue all these programs. I know that Commissioner Morrison and Commissioner Trevor share that. We'll find a way. That's our job. But I think that we can continue to expand economic opportunity to include everybody. That also expands the ability for us to fund these programs. And I think that's going to be a huge part of what we have going forward. Because again, we can't let this opportunity go because we're not going to get another one. But I think that at this point, there's so many different things that relate to what we do in the county. And the next question is for Sis, and it's really related to what we're doing from more of a green walker, biker, sidewalks. The expansion of the ability for us to do more to reduce our carbon footprint, which is also part of what I think is part of our equity undertaking. And then also, perfect example, we were just talking about it today, we need to have this commitment to mass transit. For instance, there is not a bus route that now goes to Harper College. And we're going to follow up with PACE to talk about that. But and I know that's not your job, but I also think that what are we doing within the county to make sure we address those issues as well?
That's great. I am pleased to report that we've actually taken an active role in both of those spaces as we think about what folks had previously called transportation alternatives. They're not alternatives. These are primary modes of transportation, walking and biking. Cook County recently completed its first ever bike plan, and it is focusing specifically on gaps in this infrastructure in communities throughout the county so that we can provide long stretches of these facilities, connectivity. We need to make sure that there's not a 2 or 3 mile gap that goes through one community that cuts off access to 20, 25, 35 miles of trail connection into the gems called the forest preserves here in Cook County. That is a place that we are focusing a lot of our energy and effort because we know that there is a need. We also recognize that this has been historically a component of transportation infrastructure where municipalities haven't had the financial capacity to build out those systems in the way that they need to. So our bike plan is identifying or has identified a strategic framework that where we want to prioritize these investments, what areas we need to be looking and what connections in communities we want to make, parks, open spaces. You're looking at schools, looking at walk plans, areas in and around transit stations. I had mentioned earlier, if you can't get to it, you can't use it. Making sure that we have a well-connected sidewalk and path system is one of those ways that we can do it. And it's going to take time, but that's the importance of developing strategic plans. The other side of that is transit. And again, we have robust mass transit amenities in our region. We also just completed, so timing is absolutely perfect. Just last week, our board had received and filed a transit plan, and it is setting out, again, a strategic framework for how and where Cook County engages with the transit service providers, looking at those transit deserts, looking at where there is a higher need, looking at where there is greater opportunity with businesses that are currently here today, those that want to locate in, looking at health campuses, looking at school campuses, looking at major business parks, that how can we encourage more users to get on transit when there is a choice to be made. We want to be cleaner, we want to be greener, we want to reduce our carbon footprint. Promoting active transportation through walking and biking is a key way we do that. Making sure that we can promote accessibility and increase service to the transit that exists or areas, quite honestly, through the conversations I've been having with commissioners in this room, where transit service currently isn't located, how can we work with that service provider to elevate and amplify the need? And if there's not a direct transit service solution, what are those third-party providers doing? Are there ways that we can work with shuttle services or Uber or Lyft to provide what we call first mile, last mile connections, which quite honestly might be the first three and the last three, but it's all in perspective that there are opportunities here to, again, move out of this car-centric environment for a whole host of reasons, and we're really happy that we've created strategic frameworks for how we might embark on this journey.
Saw a lot of the EV charging stations outside, right? So that was exciting to see. Equitably, we want to make sure that those are across the county in every community. I've heard some horror stories that if you do have it and you don't have a charging station or one that's near you, once that battery is gone, you're stuck in your car. I just heard that. I don't know if anybody else heard some of the horror stories. But again, like the real life examples of what it means to be equitable and to make sure that everybody has what they need based on their circumstances and based on their communities, because all of the communities, including here, you have your assets and you have some areas where, additional resources and services and pockets where maybe everybody doesn't have access to the internet and the resources that they need or the transit. And so it really is trying to be as inclusive as possible when we're looking at the landscape of the county.
And I think that this is also something that I don't think I knew enough about, that I should have, and that's on me, before I became a commissioner, but environmental racism is a huge part of what I think we're trying to address. The things that were not going to be put in my district, they're not going to go in Winnetka and Glenview and Northbrook, are going to go in other places where the individuals don't have the political power to resist. Well, they do now, because we're going to stand with them to make sure that doesn't happen. But we also have to do the cleanup, and we have to do everything we can to make sure they have the resources to make sure that they can live healthy and environmentally safe lives, which exists throughout parts of the county that have been consistently dumped on by multiple different private and public entities. This is a good question that I think, we talk a lot about behavioral health and the expansion of behavioral health in the county, and I think I'm going to have to hit Lynette again with this one, but can you just describe what the county has been trying to do as it relates to more mobile, like crisis response teams, as opposed to having police respond to mental health crises?
Yeah, so that is work that now that we have some additional resources, certainly there has been a lot more time and effort. We know that when individuals are at their worst, in their worst moment, particularly if they are spiraling or escalating because of behavioral health, mental health, underlying substance abuse, seeing the police or having the police response is not necessarily going to be the best response, and most often it is the deadliest response, right? And so the mobile crisis units and some of the work even before has really been kind of centering the public health approach at the intersection of public health and violence prevention. And so even prior to really like the mobile crisis units that, again, is being built out and kind of expanded with those additional dollars that we're providing for Cook County Health, we had triage centers, right, where folks could go to kind of detox and get it together prior to, in lieu of being locked up and arrested and then just released the following day, and saving, quite frankly, taxpayer dollars. For every day that we lock someone in the jail for a nonviolent offense, that's about $260, $300 of your taxpayer dollars that's going to that. And above and beyond that, all of the system people that have to be there to respond to that. And so the mobile crisis units is really an alternative to policing and a way to immediately try to de-escalate when those incidents do occur, and then connecting them to the wraparound services that they may need so that they are not in that place again. So certainly a very critical issue, and very much on our radar, and deep investments, not just with the ARPA dollars, but across the history. And earlier you had talked about or mentioned the new arrivals, and I just want to address it. It's an intangible, it's an intractable issue, right? A humanitarian crisis that only tends to get worse. Cook County Health is taking a lead as the health screening. So all of the new arrivals that are coming into the city of Chicago is receiving immediate, complete medical screenings from our Cook County Health and Hospitals, and they're transported back and forth to our Belmont Cragen clinic within the system. We are doing that, and we're working very closely with the city and the state to try to identify humane spaces for those new arrivals. Of course, with Biden's most recent announcement around the work authorizations, there's a small work group that just got started to try to expedite that. If, you know, it is really where your morals and your aspirations meet the reality of where we are. And I think that we are, and certainly the city of Chicago is responding in the best way that they possibly can. No one wants folks sleeping outside, not for our residents, not for our non-citizen new arrivals who are coming in. And so we are trying to allocate additional resources. And again, it's an and, because we have an obligation to our residents and to make sure that we're continuing to be a welcoming sanctuary city.
Thank you, Lynetta. And I do think that it is a different feel now than it was a few months ago. I'm trying to remember what's changed. I think something about City Hall, maybe that's part of it, because I think the new mayor used to sit behind me on the county board, and we have a new sense of cooperation and collaboration. It is a hugely significant thing for us to do this better, and we are going to wrap up. I'm going to let Kyla go last. You know, can you just give us an idea based on what's coming out on Monday? Is there something that you think that we can do collectively, both, you know, the groups that we represent and the county, where, you know, funding is always going to be a problem, but is there things that we can do to implement the concepts that we're talking about that are not necessarily completely dependent on either increasing or continuing substantial funding?
Absolutely. So our plan is also part workbook. There are 4 different activities that are included in the plan that you can make copies of or pull out of the plan and utilize that in your own communities, in your own networks, to start having digital equity conversations, to help to identify your gaps, figure out who in your community is responsible for that, connecting that and creating your own moment. So the plan is instructive in that way to help you to start your own conversations, and then we will collectively get together and try to advance digital equity goals. That's really like the spirit of the plan. We're building our digital equity ecosystem together.
That sounds awesome. I want to thank our panel. They did a marvelous job. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to my staff, Julie, Liz, and Barb. Thank you to Commissioner Morrison and to Commissioner Trevor. We do work together actively all the time, and it is nice to have friends that you can also rely on in this very, very complicated space that we work in. So thank you again for everything, and please don't hesitate to reach out to any parts of the county that can be of assistance to whatever you guys have going on, and have a good night. Thank you.